we were going to have to discuss sexual assault eventually. Now, sexual assault affects males and females and can live with you for the rest of your life. Getting the obvious out of the way, people with disabilities are at a higher risk, mainly because of the fact that people try to take advantage for whatever they can get, which is extremely sad. Now, one major line of inquiry is one, should people with disabilities be sexual beings? Yes, people with disabilities, are sexual beings. Humans, in general, are sexual beings, and the idea of a person not being able to carry out just because of a disability is not something that really sits well with me. That being said, there are some disabilities that leave someone with an IQ level or a general state that leaves them more childlike and or puts them at a greater inability to say no, which is bad. Now, on the other hand, it is essential for proper sexual education, not just a banana on a condom on a banana. And it is it's important to teach your child and anyone about using proper explicit terminology. It's perfectly fine to refer to your vagina as a twinkle cave between you and the person that you love, but you do want to have the general terminology of vagina, vulva, uterus, penis, testicles, etc., so that if anything happens, you have the proper terminology, because one, slang is not something that everyone understands in every single group. Two, it's easier to say he touched my vagina versus he touched my cookie, or she touched my penis and I didn't like it versus she touched my Twinkie, etc., etc. So when teaching sexual education, the time is not now to be embarrassed. The time is to teach the correct terminology and to point to the areas of the body using a model, using whatever, in a way that is understandable for the person, but is not going to keep them from being able to appropriately say, I have had an issue, I need help. And teach your child that it is okay to be explicit in this way, that they don't need to be embarrassed and say things like down there. Down there can mean your knees, your ankles, and your feet. What you want them to be able to say is my genitals. You want them to be able to say when something is wrong, and you want them to be able to say with absolute clarity, this is my problem. In English, in any local language that the family may have, and sign if need be, because not everyone can speak, and people who are deaf, hearing impaired, and or with some types of autism need to be able to sign for in case of an issue. I have been hurt, I don't like this, etc., etc. So remember that there are some names that you and a partner might give your genitals and your breasts. But these are not always great when you're trying to refer to them to people who don't understand your particular language. And everyone's got one, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just me. So look it up, re-educate yourself if you have to, and teach the proper terminology for the body parts. And use whatever language you need to use, from English to any local languages to sign language, which might actually be a greater help, because ASL, for example, and BSL are visually oriented languages. So you will see descriptors. People who are using sign language tend to think at a more visual level. So a person who cannot speak might be able to sign it, because fear can choke you up. You might know exactly what you want to say, and then the minute that you have that capacity, or people are looking at you, or you feel embarrassed, you can clam right up. That's half of the reason that these get stammers. And me forgetting exactly what I'm saying, or my brain going before my mouth and blips happening. So it might be good to be able to teach the basics and to go from there. So remember to try to look at things at a visual level, to think visually, and then to be explicit and anatomically correct, so that you're not saying, oh, he touched me with his Twinkie, or he did something with his Twinkie. Because a medical professional, a policeman, would not understand that. She touched my Twinkie. She touched my balls, now that one would be pretty much understandable. Many people use the vernacular balls for testicles, but for the most part, you might want to say penis, testicles, vagina, vulva, breast, etc., etc. And this medicalized language, this more blunt language, is really a great help, because otherwise many people will think you're discussing foodstuffs or some sort of mystical fairy garden if you might perhaps say something like, my garden of earthly delights has been despoiled. Huh? Okay, so, and that can apply to both sets of genitals. However, it's probably simpler just to use the explicit proper terminology from the medical field in whatever language that you use. And it can be helpful if you cannot speak to be able to point out the areas that were affected. Just remember, both males and females can be affected by sexual assault. 2, there are statistics from various places regarding sexual assault, but some of them have gotten a little bit funky. However, I will leave the links to RAINN, etc., in the description so that you can look at the statistics. And I hope none of us have to use this. The sad thing is that people with disabilities are at a higher risk of being sexually assaulted. Boys can be assaulted, and let's not put too fine a point on this. YouTube does not, for some reason, like it when people say rape, but I'm going to be explicit and use proper terminology. Rape can affect anyone at any age of any gender, and when discussing it, if you have been raped, do not go take a shower. Get directly to an ER and yes, if you are male, people will look at you a little bit differently. Don't let them. Keep standing up for yourself because it is important. People, for some reason, hear about a man being raped and they think it's funny. And it's horrible. People hear about a man who is being hurt, especially by a female, and they're like, oh, that's hilarious. But you tell the same story that you might tell about George being sexually assaulted or George being physically hurt by his girlfriend, and you turn it into Georgina being hurt by her boyfriend or another woman, and people are like, oh God, that's terrible. But you were just laughing at George. So whatever you do, learn how the human body works, learn what you like, and learn how to talk about it. Being blunt, it's okay to be emotional. So don't let people tell you don't be sad or don't, you might need a lot of tissues and it might take you time to be able to get it out, but that's okay. And if people, please be patient with those who are trying to get their story out, and save the annoying tittering for watching a very funny show on TV. Love you. Be safe and be strong and know that you're loved.